All right, so hi everyone, I'm Brian Pang, my pronouns are he, him, and I'm one of the leads of Asian Leaders Alliance. Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you all for joining us today in day one of our second annual ERG Leaders and Friends Virtual Summit. Throughout the summit, we hope you'll learn, connect, and share, and be inspired by all our speakers and all our discussions. Samantha, do you mind going to the next slide? Thank you. Today, we are very excited to host several esteemed executive leaders, all looking to drive positive change within our communities and workforce through their sponsorship of employee resource groups. This panel will be led by the equally incredible Faye Sahai, who just introduced herself. And we do look forward to hearing their talk today, and followed by a networking mixer afterwards. Then on next week, on January 26th, we'll follow with a second session where we'll hear from great ERG leaders sharing their experiences and stories of ERG success. If you haven't already, please do register for that session by scanning that QR code on the right. Next slide, please. So as we open up 2022, we at Asian Leaders Alliance would like to remind you all about why we exist and how we can use our platforms to drive change across all marginalized and underserved communities, not just in the workplace, but also in society at large. So this is our vision statement. Asian Leaders Alliance, or ALA for short, is a coalition of 250 corporate employee resource groups focusing on driving equity and social causes for the Pan-Asian community around the world. Our vision here is that we exist to unify, advance, and elevate all APIs in the community and workplace through ERG advocacy and action. Now, we are a self-organizing organization, purely volunteer-driven. We've grown organically, and we are empowering and uniting all ERGs towards the common goals of improving diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging. Our mission here is to equip and empower Asian Pacific Islanders and allies to develop as leaders in the workplace and communities, to advocate, serve, and drive collective impact through ERGs and partner organizations. Next, please. So ALA leverages our collective and extensive resources and knowledge to drive change within our communities and our ally cohorts. We do this through social impact and DEI education, knowledge and best practice sharing, and community building centered around elevating and uplifting each other. ALA, as I mentioned before, is completely volunteer-led and is completely free to join. There are no strings. You're free to drop into our Slack channels, consume our resources, but we do encourage everyone to give back as well. Next slide, please. So just the past couple years alone, we at ALA have planned large-scale events. These events are here to promote discussions within our Pan-Asian community. We've also delivered programs centered around leadership development, personal branding, and self-advocacy in the corporate workspace. We've also built things like starter guides and playbooks for ERGs, and there are more soon to be published as well. We've also contributed in the past couple of years to several partner organizations and philanthropic initiatives to serve the community. And these range from rallies to live streams, to bystander intervention training, to workshops and youth summits, and many, many more. And we're just getting started. We do have a lot more on deck for this year and in our subsequent years, and that's what this slide reflects. We're looking to make greater impact this year and operate with much more intent. And we are motivated now more than ever. Next, please. Thank you. A little bit about our history. So we were formed in 2017. And as I mentioned before, we've really grown organically. And we went from 0 ERGs all the way up to 250 plus ERGs today. We have to look at the latest data to see what our exact number is, but we're over 250. Next, please. So our desired outcomes here are to inspire and activate each other to drive change. You can make a difference. We're also here to advocate for justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workplace and society at large. And also to develop our leadership capabilities so that we can be better equipped to sustain and lead our movement than to uplift and elevate our voices and actions. And next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. There should be one other slide in between here. Yeah, there we go. So I mentioned 250 ERGs. For those of you in the audience, if you are an ERG leader or if you're a DEI professional, please do take a look at our website. It's asianleadersalliance.com. You're welcome to join our Slack channel. You can also sign up to receive our newsletters. You will find a wealth of resources on numerous topics pertaining to our ERGs and how to start and sustain and elevate our ERGs and drive causes through our platforms and through our companies as well. And we have plans to develop even more content. And I promise you, if you join ALA, your ERG goals and your overall program will accelerate. So let's definitely sign up, drive change, be engaged. We do have a tremendous platform here to support and uplift and advocate for each other. And to quote one of my friends, Yoon Kim, we are the change we've been waiting for. It was very hard for us to fit 250 logos in the slide, but one of our amazing interns was able to do this for us. Tai Chow is his name. All right, next slide, please. So this is our amazing leadership team here at ALA. I wanted to shout out and give a big thank you to the ALA founders and co-presidents, Samantha Lee here, Jimmy Hua, also my co-ALA leads, Joanne Fung, Mona Lisa Patel, our good friends at Ascend, including Faye Sahai, and all our esteemed panelists for bringing this event to life today. And I have one more piece. So before we dive into the executive panel, I just want to take a moment of silence here. So please join me in this. This moment of silence is to honor a beloved member of our AAPI community, Michelle Alyssa Go. Michelle was a senior manager of M&A at Deloitte. Michelle was also a community volunteer for the New York Junior League, where she served the underhoused and underprivileged by teaching about things like nutrition, helping women develop and fulfill their potential by preparing them for job interviews, helping them resume build, and providing guidance on personal finances. Michelle was a true leader. She was successful, intelligent, admired, and she earned the respect of those that she touched. And she's an inspiration to all of us. Michelle tragically lost her life last Saturday after she was pushed onto a moving train in the New York City subway. And yesterday there were 2 vigils held to honor Michelle, one in New York City where she lived, and one in San Francisco near her hometown of Fremont. So now please join me in a moment of silence and prayer to honor Michelle. All right, thank you, everyone. Let's choose to honor Michelle's life by working more to use our privilege to uplift and advance the underserved and drive equity. Those are causes Michelle worked really hard for. And let's also advocate for solidarity within our allies, reform justice, and also drive improvements to our mental health systems. As per Michelle's family's wishes, let's remember all the achievements and community service that Michelle worked so hard for, and not just for how she died. And to further honor Michelle, next slide, please. To further honor Michelle and Vicha Ratanapakdi, Yao Pan Ma, and countless of other victims of violent hate crimes, to continue driving solidarity and to push for justice, please feel free to join the Asian Justice Rally on Sunday, January 30th, which will be organized by our friends at Stand With Asian Americans, Asians Are Strong, and another org called Stand With Asians, and many other orgs as well. You can learn more by visiting the website, www.asianjusticerally.org. And there will also be an accompanying live stream and day of programming hosted by ALA. Lastly, please continue to check in on each other and all our allies during these troubling times. And let's also remember why we do this work within ALA and also within our communities. I now yield the stage over to Faye, who will provide a brief overview of the panel and also do some introductions. Over to you, Faye.
Thanks, Brian. Can you hear me okay? A little bit of an echo.
You're fine for me.
Me both, and can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you, Faye.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm echoing on myself. So we have an amazing panel here today, and wanted to introduce them really briefly with their name and title, and then they're going to go a little bit more deeply on themselves. Hiroshi is at Mercer, and he is a senior partner there, and we'll be talking that. Matthew Lee is at Cognizant. He's the global innovation for banking and financial services. Win Lee is at PayPal. She's a global VP, strategy and growth. And Jeffrey is at HSBC, the SVP of West Coast Regional Head, Wealth and Personal Banking. So with these 4 executive sponsors, with their ERG leads from that, we really wanted to kind of dive with them on their experience in being executive sponsors, but also respond to any questions you have, key best practices and things that they have learned from it as well, and share some of their thoughts. So definitely please keep engaging in chat. We're going to go. So we'll go first with Hiroshi, just talking a little bit about his kind of journey and his experience as an ERG leader here at Mercer. Hiroshi, you were just being projected, so you can unmute. There you are.
Thank you, Faye. I appreciate the kind introduction. And so my name is Hiroshi Bench, and it's great to be here. For starters, I'd like to say thank you to the ALA for organizing this event and for the opportunity to participate. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining, and for the ALA Leadership Committee for putting on such a great event. It's so important, and I especially appreciate the tribute to Michelle Go. She has been on my mind all week, so it's deeply meaningful to me. I'm a senior partner with Mercer, a global professional services firm that focuses on risk, strategy, and people. We help organizations develop their risk management strategy and meet the health, wealth, and career needs of their employees. And under normal circumstances, I'm based in Midtown Manhattan, but have been at home ever since the Omicron virus has emerged. But I support Mercer's Racial and Ethnic Diversity BRG, and I also serve as a member of the Executive Steering Committee for the Asian Colleague Resource Group at Marsh, which is Mercer's sister business. And I'm so fortunate to be able to work with these groups. They are truly amazing. Marsh, in case you don't know, is the world's leading insurance broker and risk advisor. We both businesses are part of our overarching organization, Marsh McLennan, with over 80,000 employees from all over the world, committed to each other, our clients, and to the greater good. My upbringing and experience have served to shape my values and my goals and what really matters to me. And this is a big part of it, because my mother, Anise, was born in Santa Paula, California, and she spent her childhood in a Japanese internment camp. And my father was fortunate enough to make it to the US from Germany during World War II, but both of them lost everything. So that, in large part, is why I try to do whatever I can to pay it forward and to focus on helping others thrive. During my 20 years with Mercer, I've had the honor and privilege of serving as a coach, a mentor, an executive sponsor, and it has been a really rewarding and meaningful experience for me. When I'm not serving our ERGs, I'm splitting my time between leading strategy discussions with clients. Within our wealth business, I'm also serving as a relationship manager for a few of our global accounts, and focused on, other commercial activities. Outside of work, the pandemic has certainly changed my personal priorities and pursuits, lifelong learning, spending time with family, travel, and spending more time focusing on my own health and well-being, but that's a topic for another day. And with that, I'll pass it back to Faye.
Great. Thank you. Amazing to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Matthew, I'm wondering from Cognizant, your view and also global innovation.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Faye, for introducing me. And also, thank you for inviting me to this event. And I think this is a very timely and also it's a very interesting topics. I'm sure you'll hear about it later on. So I am responsible for what we call global innovation. It's a building an innovative solution that disrupts the market in the banking financial service industry that helps drive new businesses for banking these clients. We have about close over 300,000 employees globally, and we're very highly distributed. So when you say diverse, we have population across all different parts of the world. So we are very, very diverse. But as an organization now, we're starting to focus on more inclusion to make them, obviously we're still focused on diversity, but now we're starting to really put gear towards inclusion. How do we make sure we feel that people are engaged and inclusive in their career planning and also career goals, as well as their feeling sense of belongings. So as I founded the Penn, I'm the executive sponsor for Penn Asian Affinity. I founded the organization last year because we felt that, or I felt that the Pan Asians were underrepresented in our company. I have a little bit of different problems where we have large number of employees in the India. They're part of our Pan Asian culture, but if you look at the East Asian and South Asian, they are underrepresented. So my job is to balance that with our India colleagues and also making sure that our underrepresented colleagues in different parts of the world are have voice, and also we continue to recruit people in a very diverse manner. But at the same time, in this society, in this day of COVID, ages of COVID, how do we keep them inclusion and feel them inclusive as at a large organization like us? So it's it's a full-time job, but I enjoy this more than I think the innovation role, because I think this is a meaningful. We have an impact. We measure what we do as an organization. So I jumped into this fray because I was an immigrant, child of an immigrant. I came here when I was little. So I came from South Korea. And I was fortunate enough that, we were surrounded by people in various different communities that really supported us. So the reason I joined decided to be a Pan Asian executive sponsor is to give back. What I received, and I felt that by giving back and participating and making sure that our associates are part of our whole network of inclusive people in the organization. I think this is something that I could give back as an individual. And also now I sit on two boards. One is the Hunter College, which is one of the largest community college. I'm part of the Asia Studies program board, and also I just joined the CACF, this Coalition for Asian Families. And I'm trying to give back much as I can. So I have day job and also my Pan Asian job, as well as now sit on two boards, as well as I sit on the 3 fintech companies as well. So trying to diversify much as I can and give back to society, and I'll give back to people as well.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you,
Matthew, no, that wonderful to hear that. Susie was asking a question. So when you're looking at Cognizant, what is your definition of Pan-Asian? Because I know Jimmy was also sharing kind of overall too. So curious when you were talking about the perspective of Pan-Asian, also the uniqueness of having a large India, South Asian cohort as well. What is your approach?
Yeah, I think if you look at the many organizations, that they seem to have a different definition. There are large number of people from Singapore, Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Pakistan. Also, I think we are forgetting that the India, because it's such a large country and with a huge population, but some people feel that they're excluded from that because you overwhelm the other population. but we want to make sure they're part of our organization, part of the Pan Asian Affinity, to make sure that we don't want them to feel they are excluded from this the D&I affinity, but we also want to make sure that we don't dilute or we don't lose sight of various different countries, like someone just mentioned there from Indonesia. So we want to make sure that those colleagues from all various different countries are not forgotten. So we include all those countries within the Pan-Asian Affinity, and that also imposes a challenge. Is to initially we started in North America. Now I was given a mandate to include now global in Europe as well as Asia. So that is now 2022 mission is to scale without losing the inclusiveness of individuals. So we're trying to figure out how do we do that, and how to, what do we do and how do we do it without kind of diluting our associates. So because you do have the intimacy when you're building this smaller group, you have intimacy. People speak up. People, when we have these issues, when we had the Asian hate issues, and people were quite disturbed that they were able to speak up in the sessions, and also some people cried in the session. But what we don't want is to lose that, giving that where we want to embrace everyone, but when it's too large, sometimes you may lose that. So now we're trying to figure out how do we keep that smaller, intimate setting while we grow as the global organization. I don't know if I answered the question about who do you include as a Pan-Asian.
No, thank you, Matthew. Great part of it, and Susie too. I think we kind of see, and everyone else, please chime in too. It'd be interesting in how your company is defined Pan-Asian, as it tends to vary from that. I know from Ascend, it's similar to what Matthew is. It's holistic of everyone together and unified from that standpoint. We'll go to our next speaker, Win Lee. She's with PayPal. She's a global VP of strategy and growth.
Hi, Faye. We're great to meet everyone. Thank you for inviting me. And again, I just echo the others in terms of Matthew and Hiroshi, in terms of what important work that you guys are doing here. So as Faye said, I run global strategy for PayPal. Hopefully a lot of you are avid customers, but in case of those who don't know us, we're a fintech that's based in the Bay Area. I myself am based in Los Angeles right now. But I'm actually, my background is, I'm Singaporean Chinese. I grew up in Asia Pacific. So a lot of my early years was Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, Australia. I spent over a decade in Europe. And then this is my 10-year anniversary in the US. So I'm really dating myself here. Exactly. So I am the executive sponsor of RISE, which is our Pan-Asian ERG, very similar to Cognizant in the sense that we started last year as well, so fairly new ERG. We define Pan-Asian very holistically. So self-identified, we are about 13,000 self-identified Asians in the company, which is about a third of our employee base. And very similar to the others, we have different profiles, and we try to cater for both the professional set, but also sort of the more kind of customer teammate set as well. And a lot of our focus has been in terms of building up the ERG, in terms of reach, and then also this year very much focused on engaging the community and fostering community, especially in this remote environment.
Thank you, Waylon. Jeffrey, would you want to come on video? You're with HSBC, the SVP of West Coast and Regional Head of Wealth and Personal Banking. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Faye. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and so happy to be here and joining my esteemed panelists here. So a little bit about me. I've been with HSBC coming up on 29 years in a couple of months, so a long time. From New York originally, moved to the West Coast and the Bay Area here in the mid to late 90s. with HSBC. And at that time is when I actually got initially involved as a member with our Asian Pacific Islander employee resource group. And so we've got a pretty long tenured history of having a number of active ERGs, in the Asian Pacific. ERG for us is one of our longest tenured. We might be going on 25, 28 years at this point. So pretty tenured, seasoned ERGs. We've got multiple chapters for our employee resource groups, and we have multiple employee resource groups at this point across the U.S. So in addition to the Asian Pacific ERG, we've got a Hispanic Latin ERG, we've got an African Heritage ERG, we have a Young Professional ERG and a Pride ERG. We have a Balance ERG, which is focused on gender equality and gender issues, and a Valor ERG based on veterans activities here in the U.S. And so multiple ERGs and all very active. I think we found at HSBC that the ERGs become a bit of the lifeblood of our culture, and we take a lot of our diversity, inclusion type of activities, a lot of our hiring activities and platforms get run through our ERGs, and our employee resource groups, and the leadership of those employee resource groups are actively involved in a lot of the strategic decisioning that we're doing across our businesses here in the U.S. and quite frankly across the globe at this point. So personally, I'm an active sponsor, executive sponsor, not only with our West Coast chapters of our Asian Pacific ERG, but also the Hispanic Latin, African Heritage, and our Young Professional ERG. So I'm an active executive sponsor. I've been an executive sponsor now for about 10 years. For me, personally, I love the passion that our employee resource group leaders and members kind of bring, and how we can truly make change not only internally, but make change in those communities where we live and work as well. And we have an active, at least pre-COVID, a little less active these days with COVID, but active local external community engagement as well. We do a lot of joined up type of events, and I remember one of the early events from ALA and the original kind of forming, and certainly Samantha and Jimmy and a number of other of you. We had an event at One Mission a few years back, and kind of kicked this off, kind of bringing a number of organizations together and with like-minded employee resource groups, and so very happy to be here. I also sit on the National Advisory Board for ARIA, which is the Asian Real Estate Association of America, and been an active member with that organization for about 10 years as well. So just really happy to be here, and happy to share feedback and answer any questions as we go through the panel here. Faye, so back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to have you here. So as you can see, we have this amazing panel with a wide breadth of kind of experience as well. And so we definitely want all your questions and thoughts. So folks, keep going on in chat. I see some engagement, but definitely would love to hear more. But I'm just going to ask our panel, and people can kind of chime in as well, kind of sharing your experience in your ERG and how you became an ERG executive sponsor. Like, what made you decide? How did they pick you from that standpoint? Who are your kind of peers? Would love to kind of hear personally too, your experience in the ERGs. Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to start us off, Faye, since I kind of just summed a little bit of that up. But yeah, I was a member of our Asian Pacific ERG when I moved to the West Coast, and the West Coast chapter at that time was pretty young. So again, that was late to mid 90s. Became kind of an active chapter member as we were really just kicking off the local chapter. We had already established chapters back in New York and in Chicago as well. So was an active member in those early days. I actually moved to New York for a few years and then came back out, and there was an opportunity to take on a bigger role, and that's when I moved into the executive sponsor role, and We've expanded chapters now in the West Coast between the original chapter here in San Francisco. We have chapters now in Los Angeles and up in Greater Seattle as well. And so my involvement started from membership, and then as my career kind of grew within the organization, opportunity came, to get involved on the executive sponsor side. That's now that executive sponsorship role I had with our Asian Pacific ERG led me into executive sponsorship with some of the other ERGs that I mentioned, and again, I think for us it's an opportunity to give our employees a voice, a specific voice, right, and locally and nationally within the organization, again, to have that local community engagement. And then it's an opportunity for us to share from a cultural perspective from those various employee resource groups back across the broader employee base that we've got, both here in the U.S. and again, HSBC being a big global company. So that's been the benefit, I think, organizationally. Certainly for me, as I said, the benefit for me is it becomes a passion for me as I work with passionate colleagues that want to make a difference. Again, want to make a difference internally, want to make a difference externally, and those employee resource groups serve as a key foundation for us to do that.
Wonderful, Jeff. Great to hear kind of about the journey. Hiroshi, I see you're unmuted as well. Do you want to kind of share your experience with your ERG?
I mean, I would echo and maybe amplify what Jeff was saying. Many years ago, I was invited to join a DNI ERG, and it's been illuminating and rewarding in so many different ways. It, for example, gave me a better understanding of how my firm views DNI. It really helped to broaden both my internal and my external network, and it's provided me with an opportunity to share experiences and to learn more about culture. And more recently, I was quite fortunate to be asked whether I'd be interested in taking on the role of executive sponsor, and the expectations for this role aligned so well with my personal interests, values, and goals. And certainly in the current environment at all firms, with all the organizational change underway and the disruption, there are plenty of opportunities to take on new roles in this space. I believe it's just a matter of trying to work to make the right connections and really expressing a strong interest in helping to support DEI. After all, it is a volunteer role.
Great. I know there's been a lot of discussion too about the volunteer role and ERGs, and I think one company was actually starting to compensate people for that, or also give them the time and recognize it. I'm kind of curious as you guys are all sharing, talking about best practices. But Wei Lin wanted to kind of hear about you and your journey and your ERG as well.
Yeah, for me it was a little different. So. I echo Hiroshi in the sense that there is so much opportunity to lead, even if you don't have the title. For me, I simply noticed a need in the organization to pull our Asian executives together to dialogue on certain topics and take action. And so I just did that as more of a grassroots effort. And then when the role came up, it was sort of a natural sort of transition into that role. And so, as we all know, there's familiarity bias when people think about people for roles. And I think, as Hiroshi said, there's so much to do that if you just do something you're passionate about and where you have an interest, I think, you naturally kind of become visible.
Well, thank you for sharing your journey. Matthew, do you want to kind of share a little bit about your journey and experience as an executive sponsor?
Sure. Yeah, I echo others, but my journey at Cognizant was slightly different because I sat on the executive leadership programs that we looked at a recruiting process because we were growing really fast. Before COVID, we were under 300,000. Now during COVID, we grew to over 320,000. By the way, this is all public information, just want to let you know. So we had to really grow fast and hire people. And we sit on these committees, and when we look at these pool of resources and candidates, was not seeing the diverse candidates, and they were focused on quite a different certain demographics. So I've been very vocal about creating a process for us to create that diverse, candidate pool and ability to hire. So, since I've been very vocal, I think companies said they were tired of listening to my kind of voice. They said, "Why don't you lead that Affinity?" So I said, "Sure." So I became the executive sponsor to make sure. Now we actually progressed quite well. We actually have recruiting people in colleges and various different groups. They focus on diversity. They focus on certain type of candidates to make sure we're bringing diverse candidates, and also I'm putting the Pan Asian interviewer to make sure we are part of that whole interview process. So when we interview candidates, we want to make sure we have an input because in many cases we hire a lot of lateral, but what we seem to miss is the next bright star. With a little bit of training, a little bit of coaching, we think that these certain people will be a next star. So I think what we're trying to do is make sure we have different views with a diversity in mind, especially in Pan Asian in mind. So I think this is why I joined, and we have made some progress. So we still have a lot of work to do, but I think I always coach our mentor and our teams to be very vocal, because sometimes that we've seen as a little bit quiet, the ethnic race. So in fact, I always tell our associates to speak up if you have something in mind. If you don't speak up, we don't know what your challenges are. So we encourage our associates to speak up as much as they can.
Yeah. I think that's great to hear. Kind of like it started off with the recruiting and the Pan Asian and kind of some of the best practices that you put into some of those outcomes that you're looking for. So I'm curious too. I see that Joyce was saying Autodesk recognizes ERG and gives them a bonus too as well. I was curious to hear what are some of the best practices from some of your companies, and also how do they best, what have you seen as a best practice for them to connect with you? I know your time is valuable, but yet we know how critical the executive sponsor's role is. So what has been the best practices you've seen in your ERG? How do you like to engage with your ERG and have them engage with you? I'd like to take that one first.
Let's start, Faye. Yeah. One of the things that we're standing up is support for our ERGs, and so people who are full-time and who support the ERGs in terms of, because we know it's so much work, and these guys are doing it on top of their day jobs. So it's really about putting money where our mouth is and putting investment in full-time people who will help these guys have organized, do a lot of the administrative tasks, et cetera, and give them leverage. So I think that's something that we've kind of copied from, I think BCG was where we took it from. And I think we'll give them a lot of leverage. In terms of just connecting with executive sponsors, I think two thoughts. One is, just being proactive and reaching out. I mean, all of us here, you would have heard echoed, we do this because we want to give back. And so we will make the time. But the ball is kind of, in your court. And then number two, I think to your point, I think going in with, if you have a goal, like be clear on what it is. Don't bury the lead. It's nice to have a nice chat, but actually if you want something from the conversation, it's good to kind of be direct about it because we want to help.
And Hiroshi, with your organization, here's some best practices that you've seen.
I think they're very similar to Wei Lin's. But probably not as formal. We don't have as many dedicated people who are focused on BRGs full time. So in a perfect world, it goes to identifying that senior leader who works at the enterprise level to champion the BRG, and it could be somebody who's of Asian heritage or somebody who's an ally or has a specific interest in the BRG's mission and shows a personal interest in DEI, that all really matters a lot. At our firm, each member of our leadership team now has specific DEI goals. So beyond a personal interest or passion, there are business goals that will drive behaviors. That said, I really do think it's super important that they do have a deep personal interest in allyship. And I think in terms of trying to identify the right champion or executive sponsor, it's almost similar to preparing for a sales pitch, that you have to do some research, get introductions to a promising candidate, and kind of qualify those leads and really explain what the value proposition is to them, and make sure that they are going to have that drive and passion to help.
And Jeff, what has been your experience?
Yeah, again, probably pretty similar. I think clearly some plan, some organization around the focus and the driver for the ERG, right? And the way we structure, as an example, our Asian Pacific Islander ERG is we have a national chair because we have 5 chapters across the U.S. and we have a national chair that leads it, and there's an executive sponsor tied to that national chair, and then each of the chapters has an executive sponsor or regions within the U.S. that has chapters as an executive sponsor as well, and so you've got kind of local connectivity and kind of headquarters, quote unquote, connectivity as well. But I think the local chapter leadership, clearly having a plan, having some organization and some structure, I think being bold with that plan, but also, having some realistic kind of bite-sized chunks of what you plan to do in a specific time horizon, and then having a bit of with that agenda, a bit of a slate. Is there an internal focus and awareness and education? Is it around growing, diversity within the employment base? Is it an external focus around community? Is it both? So having having a plan, particularly around that. I think engagement with the executive sponsor. Once you find that right executive sponsor, as Hiroshi highlighted, someone who also is going to be passionate and is going to dedicate that time. Simply asking for time, asking for support. We have funding centrally and locally for all of our employee resource groups, and clearly that's key to have that funding source as well. But asking for the time, ensuring you got buy-in, having kind of a broad tent, bringing folks in to get that feedback, and then it's a matter of I think the passion generally will drive the execution, right? But I think the challenge is to ensure you've got that what's the expectation set and that proactive plan set. Otherwise, you can get kind of far afield sometimes, and perhaps not get to that execution piece of what the driver is for that particular employee resource group.
Yeah, Jeff, good points, right? Having that specific plan and that clear alignment with the executive sponsor as well. I know Suzanne had a question. As a leader of, Asian Pacific Islander ERG, what are you personally doing to help API employees to advance to senior leadership roles? I know with Ascend, we did research too, that for Asians, it actually is a little hard. It's easier to get in the door and recruited, but it's actually harder from a percentage-wise for us to get into management and executive level. So I wanted to ask how your organizations are really looking at the advancement into senior leadership roles. Who'd like to take that question?
I could touch that a little bit on that topic because, just to go back to the best practices, I think all of you have the process to, the best practices. And for us, one of the best practices within that career advancement is we give our managers the metrics, career planning. Everyone has to achieve certain target. As I think here was just a KPI, that every managers and executives are given a certain number of KPIs to make sure we do a career planning for each our associates. So we actually sit down. That we have to spend an hour or more to individuals to go through career planning, what they want to do, and to discuss what are some of the training they would need in order to get to the next level. What are some of the characteristics we are looking for? Because in many cases, our associates, whether it's Pan-Asian or not, sometimes they do not know what are characteristic traits that they would need to have or training to get to the next level. So what we want to do is provide a complete transparency for everyone to understand what's the next level. And as a Pan-Asian, the executive sponsor, my job is to make sure the Pan-Asians in the next line. We fight for that. If there's a 5 open spot, how do we make sure we have Pan-Asians in that, the part of that number to be promoted? So those are some of the key things that we have done to make sure that we want to focus on career development, as well as making sure that we have next succession plan for these managers, and we want to include the Pan-Asian to be that successors for the next level managers.
Thank you, Matthew. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, HSBC has kind of accelerated leadership programs, and in many cases they're targeted on the leaders of our employee resource groups, right? And I think the main thing that engagement and leadership within ERGs brings is certainly experience, right? Broadens out your experience. And then I think it brings the visibility that in many cases, particularly in COVID days, right, where you're working outside of offices for the most part, and so you have less opportunity for the visibility just in the hallway, right, or in the boardroom. And so I think employee resource groups, more so now than ever, because of the remote working environment that a lot of organizations are under, continues to bring a greater visibility. Quite frankly, we've had some of our best, I know I'm getting off subject a little bit here, Faye, but some of our best attended events now have happened virtually, right? And whether that's a cultural event like a Lunar New Year event or a May Heritage event, whether that's an educational event, a speaker series event, because we can connect kind of far-flung across the U.S. now, all virtually as we're connected today. And so I think that's leading to, even where you think perhaps that would lead to less visibility, I think we're finding it's leading to more visibility for the leaders of our employee resource groups and the folks that are engaged within the employee resource groups. But that's certainly an opportunity, I think, to be identified as certainly a future leader, as from a succession planning standpoint, as Matthew highlighted. And we identify a lot of our next gen leaders through our ERGs and advance them into both internal kind of leadership development programs and even external leadership development programs. Some focused culturally and some just kind of broader programs as well. So I think the visibility piece, that engagement piece, leads to certainly those opportunities. The last thing I'd say is we have a big part of our kind of internal KPI for all of our employees is a behavioral component, key index, and within that becomes a lot of recognition. We have a cultural hero recognition every year, sponsored by our CEO for the U.S. business, and that cultural hero, not surprisingly, a lot of the recognition comes back to the folks that are passionately leading our employee resource groups, and we're recognizing them as cultural heroes within the organization and the things that they're doing to make a difference every day.
Oh, Jeff, and so interesting, cultural hero and kind of that recognition. I know Aaron had a question, is like, as you're looking at succession planning, and kind of the hope is with our executive sponsors, how do you lend a hand? Because these leaders in the ERG get that visibility and then happen to kind of transition roles, get promoted, go to other positions in other companies. And, how can the executive sponsors lend a hand in providing guidance to keep that pipeline sustainable as folks are moving up or transitioning out from their ERGs? Any of you could answer that as well.
Maybe I could just touch a little bit. Because we have such a specialist groups, so I get these headcounts reports from our HR. They don't break it down by the demographics, but I see the names of who they are and the large pool of population. We got promoted, we get to see all that. So we had a sense as to if is the next level of succession plan. Are we drying up? Are we seeing the lower pipeline of next level the executives or next level managers? So what we work with is very closely the recruiting teams. That's the key, and recruiting teams will push back the hiring managers to say you need to look for diversity candidates. To make sure they're the gatekeepers to making sure that we actually hire the right type of employees. Obviously, they have to be the right type of company, but at the same time, they are the pushers or the pushback on making sure that we create enough candidates and a pipeline to ensure that we have a good pool of resources for us to kind of start pushing for upwards versus pushing laterally as well.
Thank you, Matthew. Leland Hiroshi, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I mean, if I look at Marsh's Asian Colleague Resource Group, it's based on 5 pillars, 5 C's: commerce, the business lens, career, promoting colleague development, community, culture, and communications. And I think the last 3 are a lot easier than the first 2. Community, culture, and communications comes naturally. The commerce part and the career part is a bit more challenging. So, for example, this year's National Leadership Forum event that we had in San Francisco, which you attended, Faye. It was hosted by our San Francisco chapter, and there was a heavy focus on how to make sure that we arm people with ideas on how to drive career progression and self-advocacy. And I think that it's one of the biggest challenges is not, and this has come up during forums, I think you all know this, is not sourcing talent at the junior level, but how to elevate it through the ranks and how to retain it. And I continue to think that's a work in progress. And thanks to partnering with ALA and Ascend, that's helped us a long way. But there's a lot more to do. Within our firm, though, DEI has begun to get woven into almost everything that we do now. If you look at what it really starts at the top. Our CEO and our chief people officer have made commitments to increase representation, to facilitate empowerment, and really to create impact even beyond our company. And our chief diversity and inclusion officer has stated that it's pretty simple, that he wants to make employees feel that they belong to Marsh McLennan. So it anchors much of what we do. Now building DEI community is really begun to be a big part of our recruiting and talent development efforts through new leadership programs. We focus on creating safe spaces. We continue to expand our services even to focus on DEI in the talent, investment, compensation, retirement, and health benefit program design space. Supplier diversity initiatives, DEI volunteer opportunities, and we've even, once events started to happen, like involving George Floyd, we announced a $5 million commitment to social justice. So all of those things and happening in tandem, I think really helps to define our culture and who we are and as an organization, and hopefully serves to make our colleagues feel comfortable about working at the firm and that it's an organization that they want to work with. But I don't think there's any simple answer to this, and it's something that we constantly work on.
Yeah, Marisha, I was impressed being at your summit because it represented all different parts of your company and Pan Asian and also different countries represented. So, and to your point, you have a multi-pronged approach to it and seeing the progress as well as the executive support being so critical in that area. And I think it kind of goes to Jimmy's question too, is how did you get your ERG leads to think more strategically versus like tactical event driven ones? So like really having them think like Matthew, to your point about the career development pipeline and recruiting versus maybe the cultural awareness, lunar near year events, because we definitely see a spectrum of ERGs. One's cultural focus, one is internally focused on internal development, recruiting, and then externally focused, where it goes now to looking at business strategies, engagement products towards the Asian community, really looking at the clients and customer base. So really curious as executive sponsors, as they're developing their goals, Jeff, as you were saying, those tangible goals as they're going, how do you as executive sponsors kind of nurture that kind of strategic vision? And I'll let any of you answer.
Yeah, sure. I can chime in here. I think our guys do a great job for what it's worth. We have pillars as well, actually very similar to Hiroshi's. But so there is a one around kind of like dialogue, right? There's one around kind of career development. There's one around fostering being culture carriers. There's one around, as you're saying, external outreach. I think that there's so much passion and there's so much kind of desire to get involved that naturally, we do end up with a very rich program, which I don't think is a bad thing. I actually think it's a great thing. But in terms of, if you look at it from the customer side, they're always doing, you're always doing a calculus, right? So do you spend an hour going to an ERG event, or do you spend an hour doing my work and then go home early? And so what we encourage, our team to do is to kind of put that mindset on and just be like, hey, where is the highest bang for buck? That's number one. And then two, like test and learn, right? We don't know where actually people find the value. So sending out like feedback loops and getting like a reaction of like, hey, was that valuable? Like, what would you want to see next? It helps them kind of narrow in on what the program will be. As I said, we're obviously pretty new right now, but I do think we are getting a better sense as to where, our community wants to focus.
Yeah, and Faye, maybe I can add to that a bit. I think, I don't think anything's easy about launching, running, employee resource groups, right? It's when you have the right people, I think that's clearly the beginning part, right? But I think the latter pieces, I think that Hiroshi referenced, right? That the community engagement piece, the cultural piece, even the leadership development, career development piece. Not that those are easy, right? They're all difficult, but I think those might come a little more naturally, I think, to most organizations, and you can clearly kind of draw some lines and see some clear paths as to how a very focused group of employees can kind of drive some change and advocacy through those. I think the first C, I think you said, Hiroshi, that commercialization and within that kind of the strategy piece, quite frankly, I think that's a big leap, right, and a big jump. And I think first and foremost the advocacy to ensure that your organization it recognizes the power that the ERG can bring as it relates to those two aspects, the commercialization of that ERG and the engagement side, and the strategy piece, whether that's internal strategy for recruitment or development, as we've talked about, or whether that's literally business strategy to better outreach for customers, direction for the business, and where the business is going. But I think those two pieces get a little bit harder, and that's where clearly, I think that internal advocacy, having the right executive sponsor, the right level of engagement with senior leaders, becomes so critical, and because that's where everything is important, but those two pieces, I think, it can really be difference changers within organizations, I think ensuring you've got that sponsorship and ensuring you've got a seat at the table. We now have active forums with those national and local chapter leadership from our ERGs, helping to drive strategy, helping to determine how we can join up with groups like ALA and other organizations, and from a commercial perspective to advance our business, right, where we have common synergy and common goals and solutions and products and customers, right, that kind of all come together. So I think those two pieces, the commercialization, the strategy piece, certainly are difficult. Again, all of it's difficult, right? But those two pieces, I think, very difficult. But I think that executive sponsorship, that senior leadership support, to get to that execution on those two pieces, I think requires that type of focus. And then the other question, I think, around the career development, I didn't get to chime in real quick. I think, and Hiroshi mentioned this, the mentorship that comes from the ERGs, both kind of colleague mentorship, and as those colleagues advance their career, or that executive sponsorship mentorship, and the doors that opens, I think, from a succession planning standpoint and leadership development standpoint, I think that in of itself can be a career changer. Whether that's a formalized mentorship program or even an informal mentorship program that's developed through that engagement that the employee has within the ERG.
Yeah, Jeff, such key points too, because Yvonne was asking, what advice would you give an ERG to like her, who's just starting out her ERG? And I know we were kind of saying as kind of the journeys, you're talking about the criticalness of the executive sponsor and that engagement and having that seat at the table. I'm wondering if anyone else had some advice for Yvonne as she's starting out her ERG and leading that.
This question came up from one of my clients actually 2 days ago. She asked if she could get a half an hour on my calendar, and she works for a major sports organization, and she said, I don't even know where to start. And of course, the first thing I did was to send the link to the ALA site and the Ascend site, and I said, you can't do this on your own. You really need to. You're not going to be able to just try to get the groundswell that you need and get the momentum you need just working on this on your own. There are plenty of resources that already exist that you can leverage, and you can leverage the power of the networks of Ascend and the ALA to help in that regard. So I think when the ERG started at my firm, it was bring a certain kind of food to a group session and learn about the culture. And as those ERGs have evolved, we've changed to them or morphed them over to colleague resource groups or business resource groups. And I think that in the times we're in now, many of the companies that we want to work with, it's a critical requirement. It's a basic requirement for us to be able to answer the question about how does our firm look at social action? How does our firm look at DEI as we work with our clients? So whereas I think 5-10 years ago it was a nice to have, I don't think we can fulfill our commerce goal and objective if we don't put that front and center.
Thanks,
I may
Archie.
just add also, so I was there at Yovan. I started the Penn Affinity a number of years ago. So we started, I think the Hiroshi said it well, I think you need associate, you need help. So first thing I did was recruit our council members, to go out there, look for the team to really execute. We created, it wasn't just a Penn Asian, I created an allyship. We wanted to make sure it's not just Penn Asians in the council, but also different ethnic backgrounds. So that's we want to create the allyship as seen as a very diverse organization. And also, second thing we did is to make sure executive like CEO made a statement. I worked with our PR and internal communication teams to make sure our CEO sent out a note about creating this new affinity, why we created. So that top-down message to let people know that we have now a new affinity was very, very key and instrumental in getting people aware what's going on. So I think those are some of the key practices. And like everyone else, we actually have also mission, very similar pillars. We have recruit, we have like a recruit, then also retention, and also we have growth, which is all about next level, and also network. Network is not just about internal network, but it's also an external network to learn about the what are some of the best practices from other mature ERGs out in different various. We had companies like Goldman Sachs and a number of the financial firms joining us to have with Pfizer as well. So we had a number of people joining, explaining the best practices. So starting out, having the council members were, I think that was one of the most pivotal point, because there's no way that you could do this yourself. And you need to create a network, and also council members who could reach out and follow up as well. So I think those are the key, some of the best practices to get that going. But it is a very big task, and I won't kid you about that, but it is at the same time very rewarding as you progress, as you see the organization mature.
Matthew, definitely agree. It takes a village, and ALA is a wonderful village for your ERG, and the amount of resources, engagement. I love how they put these guidebooks together that really allow you to really pick and choose for what's right for your company. So I would also highly recommend ALA, and that don't do it alone from that standpoint. Erin had quite a bit of discussion on really kind of going beyond the words of kind of DEI, but really going into the data, the receipts, the actions from that standpoint too as well. And how do you demonstrate it and hold kind of executives, board, company accountable for the kind of the DEI words that are kind of set out there too as well? Do you guys do any reporting from that? Is it kind of shared out more externally? How do you go about it?
Well, we do measure the metrics where we can. It's based on a self-reporting basis. So obviously the data is only as good as we're able to capture it. It isn't put out on public display. I think, to be honest, that's probably tied to some level of risk aversion around doing something like that. But the data is tracked, and as I said before, there are now goals at the senior leadership level around those metrics, and being sure that each executive is formally mentoring someone or more than one person, and that's just part and parcel of what we're doing now.
It's great to hear, Rishi. And Matthew, it seems like you were also kind of tracking from recruiting, making sure you had a diverse panel as you're kind of looking from that and really looking at kind of the diversity through your recruiting processes as well.
Yes, and also we actually report out, but not as individual numbers, because I think those are kept confidential, but we have ESG, the reports that goes out, and part of that We make sure that D&I, the part of it is reported, how we're doing. So ESG is becoming the umbrella, the part of the overall going forward, the strategy. But we want to make sure we include that diversity inclusion piece as and the ERG as a part of a reporting mechanism, because we're a public company. We get judged on ESG ratings, and it is it is in the best interest in the companies with the public companies. We get judged on the stock markets are stock prices are being affected by companies who are not meeting this the ESG numbers. So I think the many organizations are now starting to report these numbers, and also they're starting to really pay attention. And D&I is a very, very important part of it, social aspect of it, as well as the recruiting diversity. All those are very, very important. But we stay very generic because some of the numbers are confidential. We try to not to publish those numbers. But I see the numbers internally. This is where this is when I look at by business unit. I could say your business unit is not doing well, so I'll go to different business unit. Healthcare industry business unit, I could say, look, you are lagging. What is going on? I will try to work with their teams to figure out why they're lagging in certain recruiting. BFS leading the race, but we try to make sure that we actually get these numbers to give feedbacks to these different hiring people.
We'll kind of turn the question a different way. How does leading an ERG help you as an executive sponsor? Have you kind of seen any kind of perspective now being an executive sponsor that you wouldn't have otherwise? And how do you think it helps ERG leaders in advancing their own career?
Yeah, I can speak from my personal experience, right? So I certainly have benefited beyond measure personally in my involvement with the various ERGs that I've been involved with, right? And so, again, beyond measure. I think professionally, it's helped me, understand and engage with our employee base significantly better, right? And it's opened my eyes in many ways culturally, and provided a lens into different cultures that I wouldn't have otherwise if I wasn't engaged and involved with our ERGs. Has it helped me from a broader career perspective, advance my career? I don't know if I've measured it that way, Faye, and certainly that wouldn't have been a driver for me personally, right? Sorry, a lot of background noise. But certainly, I think again, professionally, as far as my engagement in leading, being a people leader, beyond measure, both personally and professionally, I think it's made me, quite frankly, just a better person, right? And if I'm a better person, I'm a better leader of people, and therefore, it's in turn has probably helped me advance my career, over the almost 30 years with the organization as well.
Wonderful, great to hear, Jeff. Wei Lin, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been personally very rewarding. I think in terms of career progression, it's harder to say, but I do think I can see benefits depending on who you are. So if you are, in more of a specialist function in the organization, being an ERG leader, I think gives you a broader platform across the organization to work with different people, to network. It definitely gives you, if I think about our team, like visibility to executives at the most senior level, that I think is only kind of, beneficial. So I do think, and I don't think people do it for that reason, of course, but I do think that there are advantages, and then it is just the ability to serve and the ability to foster a community. I think is just is the reason why I do it.
Thanks, Wayland. Rushi.
So in terms of how leading an ERG helps as an executive sponsor, perhaps at the risk of calling out some of the people who are actually attending this webinar, I think the answer is that there's kind of a natural reciprocal mentoring relationship that helps both me as the executive sponsor and the ERG leaders and members grow in their respective careers. As an executive sponsor, I've always made it clear that I'm available to serve as an advisor, as a sounding board, to help set priorities and objectives. But at the same time, I've just learned such a tremendous amount about the issues and challenges that my colleagues have been facing, and it's been extremely rewarding for me, both personally and professionally. I don't know, what it has done in terms of elevating my career, but I'm quite confident that it's helped. I think that I know that I've been really impressed at how our ACRG and our RNED BRGs have helped to elevate all the members who really take time to invest their time and energy, from gaining new skills and insights, from working together to develop career path strategies, from understanding how better to navigate within the business, and being smarter and perhaps better about self advocacy. All of those things I think we've worked on together, and it's been great to see the impact the positive impact that it's had, not only on them, but me as well. And I think all of these elements are especially important in today's environment, where we're all working remotely, and it's difficult for people to have visibility. There's change and disruption seem to be the norm nowadays, and this year turnover is at an all-time high. So I think all of the building that skill set together is critically important.
I know we only have a few minutes left before we go into our breakout networking, so I wanted to encourage anyone else, if they have questions from the audience, please put them in. But I mean, Hiroshi, you mentioned it too. We have the Great Resignation. We estimate, 25% of the workforce is going to resign during this period of time. Part of it was during COVID, they didn't resign, so you had that 10% building on each other. But I think it's an interesting part. I know for me, ERGs had this really unique role of going cross silos, cross departments, cross levels, that really allowed you to kind of build your network, but also have a sense of community and connection. So I'm curious, as you're looking at it, has your company done anything different in advancing DEI lately, in the ERG, in the community, in light of COVID? And what benefits have you seen from your company?
I'll start. I think we've continued to try to double down, especially given some of the horrendous events that have taken place. There's the company, our organization has acknowledged that there's a need to focus on balancing empathy and economics, and that to me has been kind of remarkable. You read some of the press about companies laying off people on a Zoom call, but I think our organization has spent a lot of time trying to make sure that they're protecting all of the underrepresented groups. And I think that as a going back to the example of having the San Francisco Leadership Forum, that was probably one of the only in-person events that the organization had during 2021, and I was quite frankly pretty surprised that the company was willing to invest in having that event, given the travel and expense. But it really shows that there's that it takes that very seriously.
Thanks, Hiroshi. Raylene?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, like we started during a remote environment, and it's been such a Herculean effort by hopefully some of the guys who are on this call to knit the community together. So, but I think we've only known a remote environment, and the amount of just amount of programming and engagement and heart and soul that these guys have poured into it has been like phenomenal. So I think that's one piece. The other piece is, we've been thinking about how to scale touch points. And so you mentioned before that, look, the ratio of, executive to the broader population is not that much. So something we're trying is having kind of every, at the ERG level, we'll be asking every sort of Asian executive to commit sort of like an hour for like 9 months in the year, and hold kind of 1 to 6 to 8 virtual sessions where it's a little bit like Ask Me Anything. So you have kind of that mentorship, you have those safe spaces, but it allows kind of, us to scale the touch points in a way that, one, if there's kind of, it hopefully creates natural mentorship bonds, but two, if there are like issues within the community that we should know about and address quickly, hopefully it surfaces through those additional channels as well.
And Jeff, can I last closing comment?
Yeah, I think, the last couple of years, for all of us and all of our organizations, have been kind of a pretty unique moment in time, right? And for HSBC in particular, we've been going through some pretty significant transformation within some pieces of our U.S. business, and I can tell you that the ERGs and particularly our Asian Pacific Islander ERG has truly been a bit of the glue that's kind of kept us engaged and focused as we're going through this pretty massive transformation, so I think it's for me personally, and I think for our business, it's been a true difference maker, and it speaks to the passion of people that we have within our organization, specifically engaged and involved in leading and being members of our employee resource groups, and how they've helped us get through this transformation in a very very unique moment in time. So and I think within any organization, you get the right group of people with the right mission, with the right engagement, with the right support, as employee resource groups represent, can be a difference maker, and whether it's an employee resource group that's been established for 20 years or established for 1 year, right? So truly, that possibility and capability is there, and it's I think it's within reach of every organization with that right focus from an employee perspective.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Waylon, Hiroshi, and Matthew as well. The executive sponsor role is so critical to the ERG success. We really appreciate you speaking here today, sharing your lessons learned, your thoughts and insights, but also your dedication to your companies and your ERGs. So really appreciate you being here with us today in the panel with ALA and Send, and I'm going to turn it over to Samantha to kind of go into our breakout.
Yes, thank you. This was a wonderful panel. Really enjoyed the session, and especially it was extra special for me to hear from Jeff, who was my former executive sponsor. It was, it's a great reminder of why all of us involved in ERG is the community because it really does take a village. And so that's why we really like to invite you to join us again next week for day 2, and also to stay around for our virtual networking. Let's get to know each other.